Hey y'all, how's it going? Today we are going to be breaking down this huge, gigantor Vanity Fair article that was published 2 days ago on May 17th, at least when I'm recording this. And I've been wanting to break this down for a while now, but there's just been a lot of news coming out. So I finally had a chance to sit with this, and it's like a almost 40-minute read if you really want to sit and read it. But I thought we would discuss it. I'll just kind of break out some of the major points here and there. And if I'm not lazy, which I don't think I will be, I will have timestamps down at the bottom. So if in case there's something specific that you were looking for me to discuss, then you can just jump to that, because I anticipate this is going to be a long video, especially if you're a hardcore Star Wars fan like me. So you'll want to tune in, or you might just want to bounce around. So just to give you a lay of the land, Vanity Fair published this article, basically this huge feature article, and it's got Rosario Dawson on their cover. It's got Pedro Pascal, Ewan McGregor, our wonderful Cassian Andor, Diego Luna, drawing a blank. But yeah, so everyone here gets a chance to say something. And essentially what they talked about was they broke down each of the new upcoming series. Nothing about the Book of Boba Fett, really, just the stuff that's coming up, as well as kind of the pivot to television and still what's to come about Star Wars films as a whole. So we will dive into this right away and just go into some of the dates that they confirmed for these series. Okay, so just so we're all on the same page here as far as the timeline, we know Obi-Wan Kenobi series is coming out next week, so that's already taken care of. Now, Andor, Cassian Andor series will be hitting the screens late this summer, so we've got that to look forward to, maybe July or August. Season 3 of The Mandalorian will be coming either late 2022 or early 2023, so maybe December like Book of Boba Fett, or we'll just have to wait till January of 2023. Ahsoka series starring Rosario Dawson will be saved for next year, so no Ahsoka, but again, we're already packed. We're packed so tight with Star Wars content. And as well, the Acolyte series, which is set during the High Republic era. Maybe I should have the mic close to my mouth. Which is set during the High Republic era, is kind of, as they say, a ways away. They call it slightly further off. So maybe we're looking at 2024 or sometime in mid to late 2023. So those are our dates. Very exciting. Lots of good stuff happening. Not to mention, sometimes we got to throw in the Bad Batch Season 2 in there. It will be coming as well. So first we're going to be talking about the Andor series, which we don't have a ton of information on. So it was nice to kind of see them talk about this. We know that Cassian Andor is a spy kind of during that budding rebel period, and it is kind of a prequel to Rogue One. It has to be, but so we get kind of Diego Luna's perspective on Cassian Andor, and he says, to him, it feels like a refugee story, desperate people fleeing the Empire, which is kind of at its full force of power. He says that feeling of having to move is behind the story, very profoundly, very strong. It shapes you as a person, defines you in many ways. So it kind of sounds like whatever he's doing as a spy or kind of growing up, he is, I don't know, dealing with this shift in, well, I mean, Empire rocks everyone's world, but essentially, you know, what is that perspective life of someone who is kind of on the ground and being affected by the Empire? And, you know, possibly there's something about him the story begins with the destruction of Andor's birth world, then follows him into adulthood when he realizes he can't run forever. So we can see that this kind of destruction from the Empire, this colonization from the Empire, is what's going to lead him down this path to, you know, kind of becoming one of the first rebels. And they make note to mention that they say that's what the first season is about. So we will be mouse troubles. We will be getting a season 2, supposedly, of the Andor series, and it's nice that they, you know, potentially have it all mapped out. And we'll get to mapping out the Star Wars universe in a second, but it's good to see them figuring things out. Also, something really cool, they talk about Mon Mothma, try not to butcher that name, who will be returning. We saw her in Rogue One, of course, you know, way back in like Return of the Jedi and stuff like that. So it's kind of good to see them cycling through, you know, their characters, bringing them back, and expanding on Mon Mothma, because how much lore is there of her on screen? Not much. So that's going to be kind of fun. Okay, another thing that they kind of talked about in this article was the pivot to television and how that was really spearheaded by Jon Favreau and yeah, Dave Filoni as well, with the Mandalorian. And there's not a ton here that is kind of like groundbreaking or new as far as I'm concerned. They're really just kind of detailing that Kathleen Kennedy kind of had her eye on Jon Favreau, and so they kind of sat down and had a meeting and talked about what they wanted to do. And funny enough, Jon Favreau just had such great ideas. He's like a great idea factory. He was like, I just started writing before he was even contracted. He says, so by the time I was officially hired, I had already written the first, I think, 4 episodes. Dude, so I can't write that much for my entire life. And then what was going on was Kathleen Kennedy had realized that both Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni were interested in the idea of making a series based on the Mandalorian, or a Mandalorian rather. And we know that Dave Filoni is really like George Lucas 2.0, and especially getting to work on the Clone Wars. He got to flesh out all of the Mandalorian storylines with Bo-Katan, Ditch Satine, so he knows about all of that stuff. And I guess Kathleen Kennedy was like, what if I put them together and see what they do? So obviously that was a good idea. Kathleen Kennedy had a good idea. Let us not forget. And she says they got along instantly like gangbusters. Oh, that's nice to know. Although it seems like a point of contention was Baby Yoda of all things, which I could see that happening, right? It sounds like it was Jon Favreau's idea. And Kathleen Kennedy says it gave us some pause. He and Dave debated quite ferociously. Good Lord. So I don't know how Dave Filoni or how Favreau won the fight to have Baby Yoda be the crux of The Mandalorian, but it sounds like they were, going through, they had some illustrations put together, and there was some like really weird ones. I think they've released some of the early concept art for Baby Yoda, and when you see it, it's like I would not want to see the thing in Star Wars. But at some point, they got the right drawing, and they were like, okay, that's him. This is the one. He had kind of a goofy, ugly look. We didn't want him too cute. Part of his charm is that you feel a little pity for the guy, like Chaplin's Tramp or Charlie Brown. I mean, look, they've sold their merch. They came up with a good idea. So 10 points to Jon Favreau for coming up with this. Again, he is an ideas factory. So kind of here in this section, just kind of briefly, they're just talking about the volume. They love shooting on that big digital sound stage. And something funny was that actually James Cameron, director of famed Avatar and Titanic, was one of the first people to witness the volume being used. They said he was next door working on Avatar, and, he just basically went to go look at it, and he was like, I remember distinctly James Cameron taking off his glasses, leaning close to look at the quality of the image and how convincing it was. I think for everybody, that afternoon was the eureka moment because it was working. So congratulations to the volume, and it's being used on so many other projects now. Then this section, we're kind of trucking along here. They're talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi series. So what was it like to bring back Ewan McGregor? And I think the story has kind of been rehashed now a bit. We understand that basically Ewan McGregor was like, hey, I think I'm too art house. I'm a little too out there for Star Wars. And there's this whole kind of, like, should I steep myself into this role? They're like, the late Sir Alec Guinness notorious looked down on the space saga when he played the wise old man in the original films, and McGregor did too. And yeah, he's talked before about the kind of backlash and how, it's like, it feels bad, man. You make this movie and then you let everybody down. So you just kind of have to live with that, on top of him saying, it's quite difficult, also knowing you've also got a couple more to do. So, it's quite sad. But then eventually he had this turning point where he was like, you know what? 10, almost 20 years later, I can look back and say, it's kind of fun to be part of that zeitgeist. And eventually, the rest is history. They're like, hey, so do you actually want to come back to Star Wars? Do you actually want to come back and play Obi-Wan Kenobi? And he's like, yeah, sure. Then the other conversation, again, I think this was covered, like we talked about an Entertainment Weekly article talking about how Hayden Christensen was also being brought into the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, and it took him a little bit of convincing too. The showrunner Deborah Chow like literally came over to his house and Hayden Christensen's home, and it sounds quite nice. They had the fireplace roaring, a cup of tea, and just talking to Hayden Christensen about like, hey, can you please come back to play Darth Vader? And he was like, well, yes. So there's not a ton here that is new aside from kind of Deborah Chow's vision on why they should bring back Hayden and Ewan, especially to have this big epic showdown. And a bit of it I have to agree. She kind of talks about the connection between Anakin and Obi-Wan, and we see this play out throughout all three movies, essentially the three prequel movies, and as well kind of in the Clone Wars cartoon series, especially talking about the brotherhood and the love that they had for one another. So she picked up on this. We all know BFFs for life, and essentially it's like she felt like you couldn't tell the Obi-Wan story without having Anakin, and I think that's a nice sentiment. She says, I felt like it was quite hard to not include the person who left Kenobi in such anguish in the series. What intrigued her was the idea that despite what Vader had become, Kenobi might still care deeply about him. Yeah, of course. I don't know how you could not, she says. I don't think he will ever not care about him. What's special about that relationship is that they love each other. So, yeah, on one hand, it's kind of like, well, but, in episode 4, that was supposed to be the first time they saw each other in a long time. But I guess at the same time, the narrative makes sense. I don't know. I just feel like it's going to work in the end to have... I mean, everyone is so excited about Hayden Christensen returning already. So it seems like in this, they can do no wrong. Fingers crossed. But I do like them kind of having in the background of them is continuing this thread that we saw from the prequels and the Clone Wars, which was, hey... Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker, they're like this. They're close, they're tight, they're buddies, they love each other. And, Anakin's path towards the dark side, destroyed. Just gonna like start crying, it destroyed him. So I think it's interesting for them to play with this dynamic of how does Obi-Wan Kenobi feel in the aftermath, talking about, now being within the Empire, seeing the destruction that Anakin has caused. And I'm not ready for it. As for the Ahsoka series, not a huge bit of news coming out of this, except for, Rosario Dawson likes to spill the beans a lot. One thing that they did talk about, which I found interesting, was that one whole mess-up where Rosario Dawson had tweeted out an article that was like, hey, Hayden Christensen is also supposed to be in the Ahsoka series. Anakin is going to be in that series as well. And then she tweeted something. And clearly that's a big no-no. You don't just go out and tweet information when you're in a series like this, especially when you're in a position where you can neither confirm nor deny. She says, she posted that article and she said, Sky Guy, they know, see you soon, snips. And then later she realized it was just an unconfirmed rumor. And, we were all like, oh my gosh, this means it's real. And, Lucasfilm left her a nice polite little email to say, hey, maybe you should take that down. So in this article, they're like, we're not going to confirm that Anakin is in the Ahsoka series, but it is kind of interesting just to kind of be like, who knows? He can fit in that story. I think especially it seems like they are going with the whole Ezra Bridger, arc. Let's find Ezra Bridger. Let's find Grand Admiral Thrawn. And Dave Filoni specifically says, it's not going to be as kind of like villain of the week or planet of the week in the way that The Mandalorian is. He says, it's definitely driving towards a goal in my mind as opposed to being little singular adventures. That's what I want the character to be doing. And I think that's what the fans want now. It sounds like we're going to be getting Rebels Part 2, just live action. Now, if you thought that was it for Star Wars TV, I still got 2 more shows for you guys. We have The Acolyte. Yeah, I keep forgetting about that one. It's being planned by the Russian Doll co-creator. That's a great show on Netflix, by the way. And it says it's possibly going to be starring Amanda Sternberg. Yeah, possibly starring Amanda Sternberg. Who knows? Maybe yes or no. And not a ton about this as well. Actually, no, just a little bit. If you've been reading the books, I don't know if you can see behind me, all of kind of everything behind me is the High Republic books. It is just consuming my life right now. So they're turning out a lot of lore in as little time as possible, but it's been some good writing so far. And so, just thinking about in general, this is an era that takes place 100 years before the events of episode 1, and it's just kind of talking about, okay, the Jedi were so pristine and young and naive, there's peace in the galaxy, everything was balanced, everything was good and fine, until this one event kind of rocks their world, and it's not the Sith. So we've got a brand new group of villains who are coming and terrorizing the galaxy in a really, really huge way, and so it's one of these rare times where the Jedi really have to step up to the plate and battle something that they have almost no idea how to handle. So that's the premise of just the High Republic in a nutshell. And so kind of what Leslie Hetland, who is kind of spearheading the show, is talking about is what she wants to pinpoint, I suppose, is specifically how we go from being in the High Republic era to the specific events of the fall of the Jedi. She says, my question when watching The Phantom Menace was always like, well, how did things get to this point? How do we get to the point where a Sith Lord can infiltrate the Senate and none of the Jedi pick up on it? Like, what went wrong? What are the scenarios that led us to this moment? Now, I don't necessarily know if this is the type of question that you should be asking for a High Republic series. It seems like, if anything, that would be like a Sheev Palpatine backstory, something that kind of focuses on him, which would only be maybe a 40 to 50 year time span. So to take that and to double it way before Palpatine, was even thought about, essentially. It's kind of like, I don't know, I feel like they're going to have to find a way to answer her question while also dealing with the, I believe the Nihil, or however you call it, who are the villains of the High Republic. I could actually... And why, look, I'm using this book as one of my stands we have right here, Tempest Runner. Kind of what these villains look like. They're a little grungy, a little Mad Maxy, but essentially I'm like, okay, what does that have to do with... I don't know. I suppose there are ways to be like, okay, you can say the Jedi are naive. There's a lot of things that they overlook. There's a lot of things that they sacrifice, in the name of the Force, and sometimes that comes at their detriment. So, I don't want to get too nerdy here, but there's a lot of good ideas running around. There's a lot of stuff you could just adapt from some of these books and put them in the live live action. But I suppose that they're going to want to do something completely original, something completely outside of the books, and we'll just see how it turns out. Okay, and surprise, surprise, there is still one more show that has kind of been flying under the radar. It doesn't have a name, but it does have a showrunner or director attached to it, which is John Watts, of Spider-Man Homecoming fame, who was originally supposed to be directing the Fantastic Four Marvel Studios movie, but he dropped out of that project, maybe because of this. So this series is codenamed Grammar Rodeo. It's based off of a Simpsons reference. And gosh, it sounds like what they say is a casting notice has called for 4 children around 11 to 12 years old. Inside Lucasfilm, the show is being described as a galactic version of a classic Amblin coming-of-age adventure film of the 80s. So we got a little Steven Spielberg going on. Essentially Stranger Things, but make it Star Wars. So I don't know how to feel about this one. We've been getting a lot of those since Stranger Things, kind of recreating the Spielberg era, It as well. Ghostbusters kind of ripped it off. So I don't want more of this genre. I'm sorry. The 80s were a long time ago. And the fact that they're going to try to make it Star Wars, I think I'm just kind of tired of this rehash genre. I never really enjoyed it to begin with. And even Stranger Things feels like it's kind of, overstayed its welcome, but if this is what they want to do, we've got plenty more shows to fawn over anyway. Now, there were some final things I want to talk about, and specifically, I think one thing that stood out was they were talking about the pivot to television and talking about how it just seemed like a natural way. Kathleen Kennedy was like, George is always dealing with episodes. Ironically, he was serializing his storytelling. He's influenced by Flash Gordon and cliffhangers on Saturdays at the movie theaters. All of that informed what the DNA of Star Wars is, and which is why I think it's organic that we made the transition to television. That being said, they still have movies in the pipeline. And it's like I've spent like 24 minutes reading all of this stuff about television. And then it's like, oh yeah, we still have some movies in the works. It's like, what? So this is a beautiful quote. We have a roadmap, Kennedy says, because y'all ain't have no roadmap during the sequel series. And I think they hopefully have learned that lesson. But, now these movies that they're going to be coming out with are not part of trilogies anymore. They're just movies. So we've got the Taika Waititi film coming out, which could be fun. It could be fun. And we've got Rogue Squadron coming out with Patty Jenkins, I believe. Is that like next year? It's coming out during Christmas time. But after seeing Wonder Woman 1984, my hopes have been a little bit lowered for Rogue Squadron, so we'll see about that as well. We're supposed to be having a Kevin Feige Star Wars movie, and when they asked about this, they got a quote from Kennedy, like, are we getting Kevin Feige to produce Star Wars films? She says, I would love to see what movie he might come up with. But right now, no, there isn't anything specifically. So I'm not sure what's going on, because obviously we've seen a lot of stuff coming out about him being on board, and as well writer Michael Waldron being on board to write the movie that Kevin Feige is producing. Michael Waldron wrote the Loki series, and he wrote Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. So I was like, I had to look that up, because I was like, don't you have a writer attached to the Kevin Feige movie? And this just came out yesterday, interview with Michael Waldron, talking about working with Kevin Feige. Right, asked if there's a difference between working with Kevin Feige on Star Wars versus Marvel. Waldron said, so far, no, there's not much difference. It's driven by character and who are some great characters, what's a great story, and it's really as simple as that. So clearly this man and this podcast came out May 12th, should be of this year, our year of our Lord 2022. This man right here is working with Kevin Feige, so I don't know why specific, and he's openly talking about it, I don't know why specifically Kathleen Kennedy would not confirm that. And just kind, I'm like, maybe they're saying, would he direct a Star Wars movie, which is different from producing? But I have no clue as to why they're doing that. Now, I just wanted to drop a little note, because I'm like, are they ever going to do some post-episode 7 stuff? I would honestly love to see that. I know sequel series, not very well heralded, but I think they would have a chance to redeem themselves in that sense, especially if they're doing all these great television series and stuff. I was like, I think they have a chance to, return to the First Order, return to, what does life, well, there is no First Order, but, right? Isn't there a story to be told there, or would it just kind of be like, well, what are we going to do now that the First Order is gone? There's nothing exciting going on. I would argue that there could be, but, it seems like there was this whole thing about with Solo, right? They were like, we were going back and we were recasting these characters, and it just didn't turn out right. And there's this weird quote here where they're talking about how difficult it is to bring back, these old characters, or is it difficult? Using Solo as an example with Alden Ehrenreich, and he took on the role that Harrison Ford played, just as a younger version. It says the film had its admirers, and this is specifically coming from Vanity Fair. This is their writing. The film has its admirers, but made less at the box office than any other live-action Star Wars movie. Solo's swagger may be too singular for another to replicate. Is it? I'm wondering, would people have come if it was a CGI version of Harrison Ford? I don't necessarily know. I think we can buy into it. And then they use a Kathleen Kennedy quote that says, there should be moments along the way when you learn things. Now it does seem so abundantly clear that we can't do that. So I'm not entirely sure what they're trying to say in this section. I know it's been kind of blown out of proportion, like, oh, are we never going to recast the Star Wars actors? Or, are we just going to continue to use CGI? Or I don't really know how I feel about that. I think that we've been using actors to portray younger versions of other actors for years now, so I don't think Star Wars is an exception. I think it is nice that they do have the technology to kind of replicate these faces, but sometimes it still comes out in the uncanny valley, right? In The Mandalorian, some people were like, Luke doesn't look so hot. And I even thought in The Rise of Skywalker, I was like, Luke and Leia, they don't look so hot as, youngins. It looks kind of weird. So I don't think that this was the problem. I think there was just no faith in the Star Wars franchise when Solo was released in 2018. And so I think that had a huge, huge effect on it. Like, why would I want to see this? And I don't know, there's a lot of factors going into that, but I actually personally like Solo. I think like half of it was strong, the other half was a little weak, but I did enjoy it. So they kind of close out on a cute note. They're talking about Kathleen Kennedy was watching some old footage of her and George Lucas and Steven Spielberg, and they're just having a good old time with a water gun battle. And she's like, this made me realize, it's all about fun. As long as you're having fun, that's all that matters. And yeah, you could say that. I hope they're having fun when they're creating these shows and creating these series. But hey, that doesn't excuse the fact, you can goof around all you want, but if you're not still being, there's a balance between work and play. You got to play, but you also have to make sure you've got your roadmap, you've got your plan. Everything is going according to plan, and nothing is unorganized and going down the route of the sequel. So anyway, yeah. That's what was going on here. They had some nice photographs as well here. You've got Darth Vader, you've got Reva the Inquisitor, you've got Obi-Wan Kenobi. Here we've got Mon Mothma. Look at that dress. We've got Cassian Andor, the Mandalorian, Ahsoka. It's a big one of Hayden practicing his lightsaber skills. I really love that, especially the cape and the fan blowing the cape in the wind. Here we've got our wonderful producers, directors, Filoni, Deborah Chow, Favreau, and Kathleen Kennedy. Look at that. Come to Papa. That's a great shot. And that's it. And they had, if you guys want to check this out in your own time, just a little behind the scenes of the creation of that shoot, shot by Annie Leibovitz. So cool stuff. So I will leave it there, guys. And ta-da, that is the state of Star Wars as we know it in 2022. There's a lot to come, a lot to be revealed, a lot of peaks. I think they are coming up. They're recovering from the sequel series, and it's a promising future. And I don't like to take these things too serious. I love Star Wars, but I just love to sit back and watch it and have a good time. I don't like to scrutinize or anything like that. And I think a lot of people would agree. Let's just just like they said at the end, let's just have fun. Let's just enjoy what we enjoy. Take what you like, leave what you don't like. And there's just so much Star Wars to consume now that you simply can't be a fan of all of it. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but let me know what you thought about everything. This was a big episode, big breakdown today to talk about. And be sure to check out, I had a fun little video with Ian McGregor and Anakin Skywalker actor Hayden Christensen that I did on a whim. So go check that video out. I've got it here linked. And be sure to like if you enjoyed this. Subscribe for more Star Wars. And we'll be back very, very soon reviewing the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. I am hyped, y'all. Bye.